2023, the year that this documentary was made in. But other than that, 2023 has been an average year for weather so far, I think. But there's been a most likely EF5 tornado. But that's totally not something I would ever make a video on. Right? Rolling Fork, Mississippi, March 24th. A violent EF4 tornado with winds of 195 miles per hour in the dead of night engulfed all of Rolling Fork and Silver City, Mississippi. On the morning of March 24th, there was a very high number of CAPE soaring to 1,500 to 2,000, or 1,500 to 2,000 joules per kilogram. And the Gulf of Mexico was very supportive of the dew point because it was from upper 60s and lower 70s. And at 3 p.m., the SPC, or Storm Prediction Center, initiated a level 4 moderate out of 5 for severe weather. And actually talking about what people want to hear. You know? The actual tornado. At around, I would have to guess, since there is nothing on Wikipedia or Google, I would have to guess it touched down at around 7:45 p.m. It did touch down, causing 96 EF1 damage right off the bat, and was a depressing 0.15 miles wide EF1 for about 5.5 miles, but would rapidly intensify to a half-mile wide EF4, causing 170 mile per hour damage. And that was about to go into the heart of Rolling Fork, Mississippi. And this moment was caught on radar. And then also continued to cause EF3 damage for just a little bit, but then dropping to only causing mass EF2 damage. But this brief mass EF2 damage was a warning for what was about to happen. It then rapidly strengthened to an EF3, and then bam, EF4 180 mile per hour, just like that, instantly. It then went into downtown Rolling Fork, but the main damage was just in the north and eastern parts of the city. And the damage was insane. The Rolling Fork water tower was just destroyed, completely demolished. It was shoved over onto the ground and exploded once it hit the ground. The comments on the damage from the damage assessment toolkit owned by NOAA was collapsed water tower, bent just above near base, with anchoring pulled from concrete. Tank contained water, causing a crater on ground impact, potentially compromised by flying debris. And then it produced 180 EF4 damage to a 1 or 2 family home, 170 mile per hour to a well-built brick home, and then the tornado produced its worst damage yet, or at all, in its entire 60-mile path. 195 miles per hour EF4, or 6 miles per hour off of an EF5 rating. So I think there is no possible chance that if it was 195, chance that if it was 195 sustained, it didn't have a single wind gust. It didn't have a single wind gust of wind over 6 miles per hour. That's like average for anywhere. To cause EF5 damage it just needed 6 more miles per hour, which is kind of stupid. Because, I mean, it definitely was 200 plus. I mean, science says. And the comments on the building read, flourish/gift shop demolished, with slab partially swept. Few interior walls. Southeastward wind flow. Exposure of gabled roof. Originally built in the 1950s as a house. Thus, DI 2/1 family residence was used. And text read, quote, destruction of well-engineered and/or well-constructed residence. Slab swept clean. End quote. It did still manage to continue to produce 190 EF4, which is still super devastating winds. It managed to sweep the slab clean on a fast food restaurant at 170 miles per hour. EF4 in northern Rolling Fork. It then proceeded to go outside of Rolling Fork out to the countryside, producing heavy ground scouring. Thankfully, it didn't hit any structures for a long while, only producing ground scouring and hitting power lines. It then produced more EF4 damage around 4.5 miles to 5 miles from the restaurant, producing 167 miles per hour, barely EF4 damage to some trees, but then it traveled more northeast to cause even more 167 EF4 to trees. But don't let the measly 167 fool you. It was most likely 180 plus at this time. It then weakened back to only producing EF2 damage, mostly just minor tree damage and power lines. It traveled like this for another 7.5 miles across the Mississippi countryside without hitting most, if not anything, out there. But after those 7.5 miles were up, it randomly had a huge spike from 115 EF2 all the way up to 160 and 142 mile per hour EF3, completely causing chaos to 2 different 1 or 2 family residences. Then traveling another 2.7 miles, it began to track into Midnight, Mississippi. I feel like I have to address it if I didn't do it enough when saying Mississippi on the end of it. But Midnight is a city in Mississippi. Not talking about the actual time. Even though it happened at night, it wasn't midnight. It hit downtown Midnight just barely, mostly hitting all of the northern areas at 0.8 miles wide, only causing minor EF2 damage to trees, but it then tracked past Midnight and decided to destroy a mobile home and throw it 70 feet or more, only leaving half of the porch that was on the front of it to remain. At 134 miles per hour EF2, just 1 below of the EF3 rating. But don't worry, it caused 140 EF3 damage to a metal building system with rigged frames just 0.4 miles from that mobile home. Then just under 2 miles from that, even more 140 mile per hour EF3 damage was caused to another metal building system with rigged frames. But this time there were no photos to go with it, so I couldn't show any, which is kind of stupid, yo. But the tornado then tracked straight into Silver City, where the tornado was wider than the city itself, but thankfully only caused EF2 damage, which is still strong enough to take roofs off, so don't let that rating fool you. And after going through Silver City, it stopped producing EF2 damage and was downgraded to only EF1, usually staying under 100 miles per hour damage. And the most damage was caused to trees and more power lines. The tornado then decided to travel 19, almost 20 miles, just doing nothing but barely EF1 damage to trees. But it did randomly spike to cause 115 EF2 damage to snap numerous large hardwood trunks, several damage indicators. I don't know what was in the comments. That's just what they said, okay? I don't even understand it, so why should you? Exactly. And then it lifted. After 16 fatalities, after 59.4 miles, it lifted. One of the worst tornadoes in the last couple of years just went through the heart of Rolling Fork and Silver City. And the thing is, that storm was not done producing violent tornadoes. The storm recycled and produced another violent tornado just 5.5 miles from where the Rolling Fork tornado had lifted. Once the tornado dropped, it was immediately very wide and dangerous. It touched down at 0.15 miles wide and immediately grew in width and strength, causing 113 miles per hour EF2 damage in less than 0.7 miles from touchdown, which is quite strong. Especially right after touchdown, you know. The recycle then went straight into the city of Black Hawk, Mississippi. It caused EF3 damage in Black Hawk. It was very heavy EF3 as well, or for more professional people, it was a high-end EF3 tornado. And it even ripped an entire roof off of a house and preserved it. But it was 30 or 40 feet away from the main house in its backyard thingy, so I don't know if you could say preserve. Probably couldn't just plop it back on, kinda heavy. Might throw your back out. Anyways, the tornado then moved out of Black Hawk, causing very, very erratic EF2 damage. And for the rest of its life, it didn't cause any damage, so this tornado would end up being rated EF3 plus. This is the end of this documentary. This is the longest documentary I'll ever, probably, hopefully, ever do, since this took over 6 hours straight. Just researching and scripting. Not including breaks. And I took like 2 hours of breaks. And I'll tell you how long it took to edit whenever I'm editing. But not even editing, I know it'll take twice as long as scripting to edit. Well, I'll see you in the next video. Pretty sure it was like around 7 hours of editing this video alone. I mean, it's a 12, almost 13-minute long video. Actually, yeah, 13-minute long video. It took 7 hours. Just go subscribe to Magma Force, Magma Tamer, me and Magma's like streaming channel. We like live stream on there. And go subscribe to me.